All right, so this is another sort of milestone moment that we're here for every school project that seeks state funding. The California Department of Education must review and approve the project plans for conformance with Title V, and they require that the board approve educational specifications, or ed specs as they're commonly called. These have to be submitted as part of the entire package of materials that they receive. And since the ECCL project does anticipate applying for state funds in the future, should they become available, it's very important for our project to fulfill these requirements. The educational specifications lay out the design parameters of the project and gives the educational rationale for the design. This first reading of the education specifications, or ed specs draft, is being submitted to you tonight for your discussion with our project ECCL project manager, Roy Miller, and any of the comments that you have tonight will be incorporated into the document that will be brought back on November 13th. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Lindo. Good evening, board. So I'm going to make just a little bit of additions to the remarks that Dr. Lindo just gave to you. There is a requirement that the board approve an ed spec. That needs to occur in order for us to then submit that ed spec to the California Department of Education. There's no standard or mandatory, I should say, format for an ed spec. They come in all different shapes and sizes and configurations. The CDE, the California Department of Ed, doesn't really co-approve the ed spec. In some ways, they don't manage the ed spec or supersede the board or anything like that. They use the ed spec as a source of information to clue them into how a particular district thinks about the educational process and how that particular district sees educational process reflected in the facility design that they're presenting. So what they do is they take the ed spec and they read it, digest it, and then look at the plans before them, the actual design plans, to see the correlation between those. The Department of Education's main focus in all of this is to look at Title V requirements and make sure they're the entity that makes sure that the plans and specs that we're implementing meet the requirements of Title V. They also are a necessary step. Receiving approval from CDE, and the ed spec is part of that, is also a necessary step in being eligible for state funds. So this is something that we want to be eligible for. It has the potential for meaning big dollar returns for the school district, so we want to make sure that we do this process and get these approvals done. The plan is to bring this back to you in November so that you can consider approval. We'll then immediately combine this with a whole series of other materials, and the intent is to make the CDE submittal before the Thanksgiving holidays. That puts us on a track to have all of the agency approvals, including CDE, at about the same time that the architects are complete with the DSA, which is next, probably early March. And then that allows us, those are the threshold events that allow us to make submittals to the Office of Public School Construction, and those are the funding folks. And that's our ultimate goal, is being in line for future state funds. So I think it's a very big document, and as you can see, it's got lots of information, probably more, in many ways more than most, because we're much farther along. As you know, we're very far along in the design process. We actually have a set of designs that are now being produced as blueprints and in construction documents. So we have lots and lots of information to fill in what's ordinarily concepts. We're far beyond concepts. So the folks at CD are going to have a lot of very detailed information to look at. The table of contents for the volume that's in front of you gives the basic structure of the ed spec. And the table of contents, I pulled this from an older CDE used to have a much more standardized way that they wanted to see and review ed specs. They've become much less rigid about this, but just to make sure that we covered all of the necessary materials, I have used an older version of a table of contents that CDE puts out in a publication that says, here's what you need to do in terms of developing an ed spec. The basic sections involved, there's a project description section, which talks about the community of Emeryville in our case, school board policies surrounding facility design and development, the educational programs of the district, staff of the school district, a summary description of the scope of the work of our particular project, along with demographic information and enrollment information. They ask for a recap of budget and funding sources, and they want to have a basic knowledge of the schedule of the particular project. And by the way, some districts do ed specs for particular projects. Some do a kind of large overview ed spec and keep that on file with the CDE and then plug projects into that as they go along. For us, obviously, it's one major project that we're doing, so this is really tailored to be an ed spec for the ECCL project. The second big section in the ed spec is about project design factors. It covers the design concepts, the building systems that are involved, site considerations for the site that we're developing the project on, the project delivery method that we're using. In our case, that's a lease-back builder that we've hired to help construct the project with us. And then this one is not standard, but since the State Board of Education focused greatly on this when they were approving the city as our joint occupancy partner, I've also included a section on safety and security. I think that's particularly appropriate, not just given the day and age that we live in, but also because we have special considerations that CDE is going to be interested in, because we do have a joint occupancy partner, and how the community and the school populations interface on the facility and during the days will matter, and they'll want to be informed about that. The third big section is what's called activity area requirements. That's actually the bulk of the pages of this document, and that takes a very thorough cataloging of all of the different spaces in the program for the facility, and lays out all of the requirements for each of those spaces, how many people it's going to accommodate, what sorts of equipment is in that space, how it's serviced in terms of air conditioning and heating and ventilating and plumbing, and all of those issues are covered by those activity area documents. Fourth is a summary of the area relationships, essentially diagrams, how the facility is going to work and how the spaces interrelate with each other. In our case, it talks about the educational rationale from Ms. Allen and her department about looping, coring, and block scheduling of students, how those are reflected in the plans of the facility. It looks at the full-service community school concept, how that's organized on our particular site, the kinds of program elements that are involved in that. And the space relationships are also a part of that discussion. And then finally, I think, and maybe in some ways even most uniquely in our case, the fifth section talks about a summary of space requirements. And in our case, that space program is a little bit deeper and more intricate than any ed spec I've ever submitted to the CDE before, because we have joint occupants who are sharing time and sharing certain spaces. And so how all of that works together and the space utilization spreadsheets and matrices that you and the City Council have seen over the past couple of years, that's really the focus of that section of the document. All of these different programs, all of these different elements on this site, how do they fit together in terms of time and calendar? That's a kind of a high-level overview of all of this. If you have any specific questions about the content of specific areas, I'd be happy to answer questions and dive into that with you.
Board Member Twin, start.
Yes, I mean, I think this is a very valuable document right here. And for me personally, and I did not mention this because, to be honest, I had no idea how thick this would be and how much information and detail that it really is. But now that I see it, I mean, for me personally, I would like to, or would have liked to before it came for a first reading, to have some type of study session on this document for my understanding, and really, as you said, how it relates to the facility that we're building. So, I mean, because there's so much information in here, and I would like to know how it all relates. And by looking through it, I know some of these things we have seen before in different iterations, but I think just for the understanding and the relationship of the facility and how CDE will look at it as well would be very helpful for me personally. But I think it's a very detailed and a very informative document.
Again, CDE is going to, I think their feedback, although they will make specific comments about specific areas, they're going to be, I think, grateful to the board for approving a document that has a great deal of information. Again, they don't really edit this. They're not going to ask you to change your mind. I mean, they look at the board as the approving authority. What they'll do is they'll verify and validate that what they see in this document and what they see in the plans meets all the requirements of Title V.
That's not my worry. My worry is that, I don't even know basically what I'm sending off and understanding,
Sure.
everything in this document that I'm sending to CDE myself.
But if I could just point out, Member Dwin, as I've gone through the document, I don't see anything in here that hasn't been before the board at least 2 meetings previous. Right. So I think what I think staff has done is really compiled. I did see there's a number of diagrams that take issues that have been discussed thoroughly by the board and puts them in graphic form, which is, I think, better and more understandable than anything I've seen in the past. But none of it's new. It's just...
I understand that. And I understand that.
Graphics.
And I'm just, from my perspective, just going over it in a study session to really know all what's in here and what all we've done in the past compiles this very important and invaluable document.
I'm happy to do that if you all want it and you have the time and can make a date. I'm happy to do that.
Well,
it would be
can I
great.
suggest that this is, it's an agendized item, and this is a good time to go through it. I think...
No, I don't think as thick as this document is, we could go tab by tab with a, high, and I'm not talking a deep dive, but a high level understanding of each one of the tabs and how it all relates. I wouldn't want to do that tonight. We'll be here too long.
Well, it's only 7:30, and we only have one other item on the agenda. I think that staff has agendized time.
What's the pleasure of the body?
What's the pleasure of the board?
I don't know how to use mic. I don't need to go through it. I think it's all information that we've seen. So, but I'm along for the ride.
I was also daunted when I saw how thick the document was, but then I also had the same reaction that member signed it.
Okay.
And when I sat down with it, it was stuff that we'd seen before.
Right.
Stuff that's been in front of city schools, policies adopted there,
Right.
design that we approved.
Okay, all right.
So I'm left feeling that there's enough time between whatever we want to do tonight on the first reading. We got
Okay.
a second
All right,
reading coming
all right.
around too.
Okay.
That the 2 nights should be sufficient.
Okay, well, if the board's pleasure is that, I'm fine.
Could I make one more comment? I mean, I think in some ways this is a I was going to say a testament, but that's not exactly what I mean. It's a good demonstration of how much and how deep the work has actually been, and over a very long period of time. There are diagrams that I went back and pulled out
Right.
from 2003 and 2004, and they still
Oh, true.
are they still are relevant.
Right.
And to me, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That something can be pursued for this long, and the core truths still ring through, is really remarkable.
All right, well, this can just be pleasure reading throughout.
I will point the board's attention to one page in particular that I thought enlightening under tab F, summaries, where it summarizes on page, looks like 7, under the, it's the Lakoff demographics research, which again, this has come to us in the past, but I was particularly struck on the chart that shows total births to Emeryville residents, 1978 to 2008, and that from 2004 to 2008, the number of births just skyrockets. And I'll go ahead and just pass this page around. It's probably easier this way. So I find that very interesting in terms of where we're going as a city, and you know, we've argued for a long time that if we don't build this, we're going to end up running out of room, and when I see this, it just reminds me once again, you know, one of the reasons we're doing this is out of concern that if we don't do it, we're not going to have enough space for the number of kids, because kids are born and then they get older. My daughters keep reminding me of this. And we need to make sure that there'll be room in the future, particularly because Emeryville's general plan states that we're going to grow from a population of 10,000 people to a population of 20,000 people. So for that reason as well. I had a couple of questions on a couple of sections, but before I go to that, I want to see if other board members have questions.
So I have a few.
Please.
You answered my first one, which is, what is the state expecting and requiring in an spec? You said it's pretty loose.
They require an ed spec. They don't require a specific format.
Yeah, so that, I want to know if we met it. In your view, have we met what the state's...
I'm sure we will, yes. And if they come up with a request for additional information, we'll provide it.
Are you getting recording?
Push your
You
music.
get it? Yeah. an observation is that this is a compilation of a number of different documents. As a result, the fonts are all over the place. So I think we could just make that uniform.
Oh, I don't even have access necessarily to all of the Word versions of these things. Most of these are PDFs.
PDFs combined, there's not, I don't know that, the stuff that's diagrams is one thing, but there's a lot of text pieces.
Yeah, from
Next to each other.
many years. I mean, some of these documents go back 4 or 5 years, and what I have are all PDFs. In order to accomplish what you're asking, we'd have to go through and try to convert all of the old PDFs, and then make sure that they don't lose format and all that sort of stuff, and then re-font them.
So we can't read some of these graphs? They're just in here.
We can't edit them, I guess, but
Can we read it?
Well, a lot of them aren't my. They are produced by a whole variety of consultants over a whole variety of years, and so you're right. The fonts are whatever those original documents produced at the time.
Okay. Well, it looks a bit like a jumble, so maybe it's putting in some clear headers or, blank pages that separate and segment out what's coming afterwards.
Looks so much better than when we used to hand type everything. We've come a long way.
We have. A specific question was, and I forget what page it's on in here, but at one point, I think it's in that big section 3 where you talk about lighting and landscaping and parking, and the question was, do all those specifics conform to our latest iteration of the design? Because some of those things changed after the Planning Commission responded. There were just some changes. So I wanted to make sure we were sending them our current version.
Yes, all of the.
And it's just something to check if you don't know.
Yeah. So I'm just very rapidly in my mind. The things that we may not have completely caught up with are things that are in the Planning Commission's list of conditions of approval, but CDE isn't going to notice or will they care?
Maybe we can just include the Planning Commission's conditions of approval.
But they really don't care. I mean, it's not relevant at all to what their interest is. Their interest is in how are the educational programs of the district reflected in the school design. They don't really care about the 53rd and San Pablo intersection or its signalization. And a great deal of the Planning Commission conditions of approval have to do with issues like that, not like education and how it's reflected in the facility design.
Well, to the extent that we've got documents in here that are part of our ed spec, I'm thinking around the traffic,
So what I did was I pulled the
Lighting.
CEQA. I pulled the CEQA document that the board approved. So that was the source that I used for talking about those issues, and I did that intentionally because it was a board-approved document.
So you don't think we need to update with you came back to us in August, was it, with some tweaks around the subsequent to the Planning Commissions? Or maybe it was September.
Yes.
But recently.
Some of those, the ones that are really kind of site design issues, those have all been picked up. The ones that haven't, like I said, there are some of the Planning Commission conditions of approval that are not thoroughly digested in the plans that the architects are working on at this point. By the way, there's more than one cycle of submittal with CDE. What I'm trying to do right now is make submittal number 1 so that we get the process started with CDE. There's also a submittal number 2, which will happen when we have approved plans and specs. Those go back to CDE. But CDE still, even then, even next February or early March, when all of that exists, CDE is not going to look at the changes that have happened at the intersection of 53rd and San Pablo because they don't care. They're going to focus on what's the space program for the facility? What are the sizes of rooms that are in the facility? Are those still true in the final design as submitted by the architects? Those are the things that Title V addresses, and those are the things that CDE is responsible for.
So they won't care where the play equipment is within the site and the fact that...
No, they care that they care about the they care about physical education, just as you all do, and you were talking earlier in the meeting tonight. They care about that. They care that there are lots of educational opportunities for students, and we will certainly be able to demonstrate that with the design of this site.
Good.
We will have to submit, so let's do this a little bit more, even a little more thoroughly, even if it's boring. Our site does not meet the standards that CDE uses for acquisition of a new site. But they don't apply those standards to an existing urban site. So what they require is that we do a special rundown. We have to do a special laying out of how our physical education opportunities are accommodated on a site that's smaller than if we were in Livermore and out purchasing a brand new site for a brand new school.
Makes sense.
So we'll have to do what's called a PE justification document because they know we're on a small site and they know that we can't and won't run PE in the same way that a site that's 40 or 50 acres is going to run PE.
Right. Is that described in here?
It is not, but it's on a separate, there's a separate form because we will show a site size that is not standard in the way of new acquisition of suburban sites. We'll have an additional requirement where we have to fill out what's called a PE justification form.
Right.
It's a separate document, and that will also be submitted as part of the whole package, but it's not part of the ed spec.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're addressing the pieces that need to be addressed in terms of what's our current design and educational program.
Yeah, so this isn't, the ed spec is not meant to gather together every bit of information. I know it looks like that, but it's not meant to gather together every bit of information about the project. It's meant to focus on those things that CDE is actually concerned about.
Okay. The piece that seemed new to me that I don't remember seeing is section 4, right at the end, the summary of area.
Yeah, and what you've seen is you've seen graphic versions of that because you've seen the floor plans. So what that does is that creates as a spreadsheet every space, every...
I'm not on the spreadsheet yet.
Okay.
I'm on these really nice full-service community school graphics.
Those are new.
Page 3, 4. They're not new?
They are new.
Yeah, they are. So that's
Yes.
that's what I'm saying.
Those are new.
What section are you in?
The very end.
This page.
Very end.
That one.
So, and I want to spend some more time with them, but my first impression was these are really good.
Great.
And,
Thank you.
And that they convey graphically a lot of what we're trying to build with a full-service community school model. So,
If you'll notice what we did, what I intentionally did was I took the section that Ms. Allen drafted, which was section 1D about the educational rationale. I took her explanation of the district's educational rationale, and I tried to make pictures of that. And so item by item, whether it's Luke Core Block, whether it's full service community school, whether it's whatever it might be, I tried to take each of those. I don't know if I got every single one of them, but I tried to take those major educational rationale concepts and make them into pictures.
yeah, and
Very useful.
I want to pull out one in particular, and that is the somewhere around 314, the schools, the student trajectory
Yes.
versus it's
So that one is meant to depict the
316.
power of the K-12 idea.
yeah. I thought that was the best graphic I've seen of this. Maybe you all have seen. I don't remember seeing this before.
No, that's new also.
But I thought the depiction of how the arc of a student's trajectory has more slips in it and gaps when you're transferring between schools and different environments, different teachers, different classrooms, over time has an impact versus what we're trying to achieve, which is a much smoother, integrated trajectory with our looping, with our K-12 model that hopefully, and with cooperation with post-secondary institutions, that gets our students much better prepared at a higher endpoint than they would under
And the
traditional
piece of
model.
that that's hard to depict as a picture is the also powerful idea that being on a site with a group of teachers and students for 13 years means that all of those relationships are much longer, much deeper, much more meaningful, and that's if there is a big advantage of being a tiny school district, that's got to be it.
Yeah, and that's page 316 of the PDF if there are folks at home trying to follow along. And also I thought the looping core and block, a few pages later, graphic was helpful too with the explanation. So I appreciated those, and I think we need to incorporate those in our communications work. And figure out how to do that. Right at the end, there were 2 pages at 319 and 320 on security that seemed incomplete yet, just because they have some kind of fake Latin words in them yet. So I didn't know if you need to update those. Lorem ipsum.
Which page is that?
Blah, blah, blah. It's 319 and 320. There are 2 pages on security and age separation. And the description is just sort of filler language.
Oh, yeah, look at that. ASDF.
Oh, I've yanked the wrong one. I pulled the wrong files. I will correct that for your final. You're right. It's silly Latin.
It's,
Yeah.
right.
And then on the sort of the graphic description of the school use, the second to last page, 329, full program usage on weekends, it seemed that it was all, if I'm reading it right, community use on the weekends, just because it's all red. second to last page, 329.
It's a utilization schedule.
Yeah. And my question is,
Oh.
shouldn't some of that be?
No,
There's
because
no ever school use?
that is actually what happens on weekends.
Well, are we not ever, I know occasionally we'll have the drama club come in and want to practice or.
Sure, and that's
something.
why it shows it all as shared.
So it's shared, it's not, well, I guess, are we going to have the capacity for school, not to share it, but for school to come in and students to use school buildings and teachers use school buildings on weekends? And
Sure, I mean,
are we depicting that properly by just calling it all shared?
well, there are no, that I'm aware of, it doesn't preclude anything. But at least as currently imagined and as currently programmed, there are no reserved school classes or courses that occur on those days. It doesn't mean that it can't happen. It just means that there's nothing that's been described currently.
Okay, so I guess these graphs depict it's a description, not an estimation.
Well,
Description of what
it's
current
not
programming is. So
it's not a rule. It's not meant to be dictating who does what when. These space utilization diagrams you have seen before. These are the space utilization diagrams that form the basis of the sharing relationships and the sharing percentages that are being captured in the joint occupancy agreement. They're not meant to be permanent. They're not meant to be unbreakable or absolute. They're meant to be the place that we're starting. It's kind of the initial set of assumptions about space utilization as we move into the facility. And then the joint occupancy agreement allows for the continual refinement and alignment of all of that.
So I think it might add clarity to any third party looking at this to take the section of the joint use agreement that says that and put it in as a preference and, indicate that these are, preliminary projections subject to the, I forget the name of the committee that's going to modify them every year.
The administrative committee, I think it was
Subject, because as a practical matter, every
Programs
year,
committee.
the program people will get together and they'll modify this.
And they'll make a
And
schedule.
so I think it might cause some concern from the folks who are reviewing this in Sacramento if they don't understand that this isn't set in stone and that we do have an agreement, even if it's the current working draft.
That's a great idea. I'm happy to
I
do
think
that.
we can just put that in as a preface and then put some notation on the actual drawings that indicates it's, preliminary, initial first-year projection.
Yes, great idea.
I think those are both good suggestions, and if we can add to that your point about this isn't prohibiting school uses on, weekend hours or otherwise, which would seem in education something, relevant to what you'd want to know in an ed spec.
Yeah,
Can
sure.
just
No, it's
we'll
good.
use the space.
Good
And on
information.
The legend is unclear, actually, as I look at it now.
The colors don't
The colors
quite,
don't match
yeah.
up, so-
That's going to be a color
So
printer
the purple,
issue. I'll have to
purple
tweak
shared,
that.
this should be purple, not red?
Yeah.
Okay, so you make those line up if you can. Or at least use words.
Well, I understand our new science teacher, who we'll be introducing in a moment, has some skills in those areas.
So Roy, with all that being said, after you make those revisions to these 3 charts, can you print me out a bigger edition of this?
Sure.
Yes, just so I can kind of read it a little bit better.
Good. Are there any other questions from board? Yes, please.
Really quickly. So, so this utilization chart reflects what will be in our first edition of our joint use occupancy. Agreed?
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes.
Okay.
The relative percentages show up in the operations and maintenance section
Okay.
and in the capital replacement section. Those percentages that you see tie into how the space is being utilized.
All right. Yeah. I can get the bigger one after the revision. That'd be great.
Other questions or comments on this? I just had one question. The demographics that are used here are from 2008-9, and will it be issued that we're not showing 10-11 and 11-12?
Well, so what I did was I pulled the executive summary from the 2008-9 demographic study is much larger than what's actually included in this ed spec. I used the executive summary from that, and then I included a memo, an update memo that Lapkoff and Gulbelay did in 2010. That's actually the most recent run-through of the demographics that we have.
But under the enrollment section and the school description section, there were descriptions of, excuse me while I look through it, from 8-9, and I just wasn't sure if, we know what our enrollment was in 9-10 and 10-11.
Oh, have we gone back and kind of mapped that onto the demographic report? I haven't.
I don't know that it's a matter of mapping it onto the demographic report, just in terms of our description of our school and how many students we have.
So what I used there, I went and I pulled, in terms of the enrollment and the CDE is interested in the enrollment that's related to the project that you're submitting in front of them, and then they're also interested in the enrollment projection for the master plan of that particular site and facility. So what I did was I pulled the CEQA sections, because I didn't want to publish anything to CDE that was in any way inconsistent with the CEQA approvals that you all have made.
So this conventional enrollment forecast, where does this piece of information?
That comes from the demographics reports that Lapkoff and Gulbelay did. The latest update memo that they were hired to produce was 2010.
Okay, so that's this right?
That's what you're looking at, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any comments from the public on this item? No? No further comments from the board or questions? Then we will, let me just ask, there is no delay in the project if this is not submitted until after our November 8th meeting?
Correct. Our plan is to submit this before the Thanksgiving break.
Excellent. Okay, very good.
We'll be bringing this back for a second reading, and I just wanted to make sure that when we bring it back for a second reading, with all of your questions answered, we'll be ready for to take action on this item. Is that
Very good.
good? Okay. Great.
Yeah, I think this is actually, this item came before us 7 years ago when we did our first ed spec, and it's evolved enormously over the last 7 years. And I'm just so delighted to see how far it's come, and it's a wonderful summary of everything we've done. So, looking forward to seeing it come back.
Okay.
The financial